There's something about the word nice that can destroy you. It's not shouted. It's not meant as a weapon. It just hangs in the air like a verdict, small and devastating, and suddenly your entire decade of work feels like background noise at someone else's dinner party. My name is Sophie. I'm 33 years old, and I've spent most of my adult life believing that if I just kept my head down, worked hard, and stayed consistent, everything would eventually fall into place. Love, stability, partnership, the kind of future you don't have to defend because it speaks for itself. Last Tuesday was supposed to be proof that I hadn't wasted my time. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. I work in corporate finance, not the glamorous kind you see on social media. No inspirational LinkedIn posts, no before and after transformations, just numbers, pressure, 70-hour weeks, and the unspoken understanding that one mistake could be your last. I started as an analyst 11 years ago, fresh out of college, watching people leapfrog over me, burn themselves out, and disappear. But me? I stayed. I showed up. I missed birthday celebrations with my family, trips with friends, entire seasons of my own life, all for those numbers on a spreadsheet that seemed to matter more than anything else. When my boss called that Tuesday afternoon and said, "Congratulations, Senior Vice President," I actually had to sit down. Corner office, real authority, a base salary of $195,000 plus performance bonus, the kind of money that doesn't just change your bank account, it changes how people listen to you, how they make room for you, how they suddenly remember your name in meetings. I left work early for the first time in months, stopped at a specialty shop, the kind with the low lighting and the quiet classical music, and bought a bottle of actual French champagne, the kind I'd always said was for someday. I picked up flowers, too. Nothing over the top, just clean white lilies that smelled like something pure and real, because this wasn't just my win. I thought it was ours. Have you ever felt that feeling? Like something amazing was about to happen? Like everything you'd been working for was finally being recognized? My boyfriend, David, and I had been together for 3 years, engaged for 8 months. We were supposed to move into our dream apartment next month, this incredible place with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire skyline, an in-unit washer and dryer, a second bedroom he kept calling our future office. He'd been obsessing over it for months, talking about it like it was already ours, like our future was just waiting to be unlocked. I had already signed the lease 2 weeks earlier. First month, last month, security deposit, $11,400 straight from my savings. And I remembered seeing a 14-day cancellation clause when I was signing, the kind of thing you notice but don't really register, like noticing an emergency exit sign without expecting you'd ever actually need it. I got home around 5 o'clock. David was on the couch, scrolling through his phone like he'd been there all day. I walked in, holding that champagne, holding those flowers, probably smiling like I'd just won the lottery. "Guess who just got promoted to Senior Vice President?" I said. He looked up and smiled, but something about it felt incomplete, like he was waiting for the real information to arrive. "That's great, babe," he said. "Senior Vice President of what?" "Same department, just finally at the top," I laughed, trying to keep it light because, well, it was a big deal. Corner office, major raise, everything I'd been working toward. "How much?" he asked. "$195 base plus bonus," I said. He nodded slowly, set his phone down, and then said the word that would change everything. "That's nice." That's nice. I stood there holding the champagne up like it might jog his memory, like maybe he'd forgotten what we were celebrating. "I thought we could go to that Italian place you love, the one with the truffle pasta you're always talking about." "Sure," he said. "Yeah, that sounds fine." And then he picked his phone back up, before pausing like he'd just remembered something important enough to interrupt his scrolling. "You know, my ex, when she made partner at her firm, she was only 30, full equity. She was pulling in close to $400,000 by the time we broke up." The room went very still. I stood there with champagne in one hand and flowers in the other, trying to understand what I'd just heard, trying to understand how the best news of my decade could be measured against someone else's ex and found insufficient. He didn't mean it to be mean, he continued, his tone so casual, so reasonable. I'm just saying your promotion is fine. It's a step, but it's not exactly impressive. You're 33, you should probably be further along by now. I set the champagne down very carefully on the counter, put the flowers next to it. Noted, I said quietly. Don't be like that, he said. I'm just being honest. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? I went into the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. I don't know how long I stayed there, 20 minutes, 30? I just stared at the wall like it might explain something if I looked hard enough. From the living room, I could hear the TV turn on, some familiar show, the sound of someone completely unbothered, the sound of someone who just dismantled their fiancé's happiness and moved on to the next episode. Here's what surprised me the most. I wasn't angry, not immediately. I was empty. In one conversation, the person I was supposed to marry had taken the best news of my working life and reduced it to nice. He'd measured me against a woman from his past and found me lacking. And the worst part? The casualness of it, like it was just the truth we both should have already understood. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying his words like a financial statement with errors I couldn't reconcile. Your promotion doesn't impress me. You should be further along by now. Like I was a stock underperforming some invisible benchmark. Like my worth was something to be quantified and compared and ultimately found wanting. The next morning, David left for work like nothing had happened. He kissed me on the cheek, mentioned we needed to look at furniture for the new apartment, asked if I preferred walnut or oak. The $3,800 a month apartment I'd already signed for, alone, with my money. I watched the door close behind him and stood in the quiet, and I realized something in that silence that felt like the truth finally speaking. I opened my laptop. The lease agreement was still pulled up from the night before. I hadn't meant to read it again, but my eyes landed on the same line they'd found last night. 14-day cancellation clause, full refund within the window. For the first time since he'd crushed my promotion into the ground, my chest didn't feel tight. It felt clear. And in that clarity, I made a choice that would unravel everything. Next time on The Unraveled Future, what happens when you finally decide that enough is enough? I didn't confront David that night, not because I was afraid of the argument, but because I already knew exactly how it would go. He would explain himself with that calm, reasonable voice of his. He would say I was taking it too personally, twisting his words, being oversensitive, and somehow, by the end of it, I'd be apologizing for being hurt instead of questioning why my success had needed correcting at all. So I lay there in the dark, listening to his breathing beside me, steady, untroubled, unburdened, while my mind ran through every possibility, every version of events that would somehow make this okay. It wouldn't. By morning, I hadn't slept. David got up and moved through the apartment with that ease of someone completely at home, completely certain of their place in the world. He leaned down, kissed my cheek, and said, "We should look at bar stools for the new place tonight. The island's bigger than this one." I watched him leave, then sat at the kitchen table long after the door closed, watching my coffee go cold. The champagne from yesterday was still on the counter, untouched. The flowers had already started to wilt at the edges, their white petals beginning to curl inward like they were giving up. I opened my laptop without really thinking about it. The lease pulled up automatically. I scrolled past the cancellation paragraph, then scrolled back up and read it again, slower this time. 14 days, no penalty, full refund. I closed the laptop. I wasn't ready to decide anything yet, but something had shifted inside me, a recalibration, like when you suddenly realize you've been reading the map upside down your entire life. The rest of the day passed like a blur. David texted from work, "Did you see that couch I sent?" Thinking charcoal gray. Also, do you want the second bedroom as an office or a guest room? I replied with short answers. Looks fine. Either works. We can talk later. He didn't notice anything was wrong. Why would he? In his mind, he'd just been honest with his partner, and honest partners don't leave over one conversation. But I was beginning to realize that this wasn't about one conversation at all. This is the moment when everything starts to become clear, when you realize you've been making excuses for behavior you shouldn't have to excuse. That evening, I found myself replaying things I'd dismissed before. The way he'd rolled his eyes when I talked about work stress, how he checked his phone during my stories but expected my complete attention when he was talking, the comments about his ex that came up just a little too often, always framed as motivation. She'd been successful younger, she'd had better instincts, she'd known how to push him, she. I'd never competed with anyone before. I'd never thought I needed to until this moment. That night, David asked if I wanted takeout. I said I wasn't hungry. He shrugged, ordered for himself, and ate on the couch while scrolling through area rug listings on his phone. I watched him from the doorway and felt something crystallize inside me. He wasn't cruel. He was convinced he was right. And that meant this wasn't about a bad day or insecurity or stress. This was how he saw the world, how he measured people, how he'd been measuring me all along, watching me for the moment I'd finally fail to measure up. I went to bed early, alone, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the apartment with the skyline view, the one I'd signed for with my own money, the one he talked about like it was already his. And then I asked myself a question I couldn't unhear once it was in my head. If this is how he sees me at my absolute best, what happens the first time I fall behind? The answer came quietly, but it was very clear. By morning, I wasn't angry. I was done. Done waiting to be impressive enough for someone who would always be looking past me at someone else. Done performing. Done shrinking. Done. I called in sick that morning, not because I was unwell, but because I needed a day without noise, without David's voice shaping the room, without his version of reality pressing in on mine. The apartment felt different in daylight, smaller, like it had already started to shrink around the life he was designing inside it. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and the lease pulled up again. I told myself I was just reviewing it, that I wasn't making any decisions yet, but my eyes went straight to the same paragraph, still valid, still clean, still mine, and my hand was on the phone before I could second-guess myself. "Hi," I said when the property management office answered. "I'm calling about a lease I signed 12 days ago. I wanted to confirm the cancellation policy." The woman on the line was efficient, polite, utterly unemotional. "Yes," she said, "you're still within the 14-day window. Full refund of all deposits. Processing takes 5 to 7 business days." There it was. No drama, no judgment, just a choice. "Yes," I said. "Please cancel the lease." She confirmed my email, thanked me, and that was it. When I hung up, I didn't feel relief, not yet. I felt quiet, like a room after the furniture's been removed, and all that's left is the echo of what used to be there. By noon, I'd found a studio apartment 15 minutes from my office. Older building, beige carpet, appliances that looked like they'd survived at least 2 decades of neglect. The bathroom had tiny hexagonal tiles that would probably never be fully clean no matter how much you scrubbed. But it was available, month to month, $1,200 a month, utilities included. It wasn't aspirational, but it was mine. I signed the paperwork that afternoon, paid $2,400 total, first month and deposit. As I walked back to my car, the contrast hit me hard. $11,400 I'd almost handed over for a lifestyle that required me to keep proving myself, keep performing, keep wondering if I was enough. $2,400 for peace. That evening, I went back to the apartment I shared with David and started packing. Just my things. Clothes I'd bought,
books I loved, electronics I'd paid for, kitchen items I'd brought with me when we'd moved in together. Every box felt deliberate, grounding, like I was physically removing myself from a life that never really fit anyway. He came home while I was loading the last boxes into my car. "What are you doing?" he asked, confusion sharpening into something that looked like disbelief. "I'm moving out," I said. "Moving out? We're moving into the new place in 3 weeks." "No," I said, closing the trunk carefully. "I'm moving into a studio alone." His expression shifted then, annoyance first, and then something that looked almost pity, like he was looking at me the way you look at someone having a crisis you don't quite understand. "This is about yesterday, isn't it?" he said. "You're overreacting." "I'm reacting," I said. "There's a difference." "I was just being honest with you," he said, exasperation creeping into his voice. "And honestly, I'm not impressed with how you're handling this." I closed the trunk and looked at him, really looked at him, and something in me went very still. My ex from college told me I was remarkable before I had anything to show for it. He believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. He made almost nothing working in nonprofit, but he made me feel like I mattered, like my future was worth investing in. David stared at me, stunned. "I'm just being honest," I added quietly. "Isn't that what we're supposed to do?" He didn't laugh this time. I got in the car and drove away. That night, I slept on an air mattress in my new studio. The room smelled faintly like the previous tenant's cat. The walls were thin, a streetlight outside flickered through the window in an irregular rhythm, and I slept better than I had in months. The next day, the lease cancellation processed. My deposits were already on their way to my account. David had no idea. He still thought we were moving into that luxury apartment with the skyline view. He texted me about paint colors, furniture layouts, asking if I preferred a sectional or a sofa. I answered politely, vaguely, "Sounds fine, we'll see, let's talk later." I knew I should end it cleanly, should sit him down and have the conversation, the one where I explained why I couldn't stay, but part of me, just a small, honest part, wanted him to stand in that luxury building with his assumptions and see what happens when you treat someone like they're replaceable. Was it petty? Absolutely. Did I care? Not even a little bit.
The first week in my studio passed quietly, too quietly. I stayed in that small space, unpacking slowly, deliberately, like I was teaching myself how to exist in less while still being myself. I stacked books on the floor until I could afford a shelf. I hung 2 blouses in the closet and left the rest folded in boxes. I bought a cheap kettle and a single mug I actually liked. Everything felt temporary, but honest. Marcus thought I was staying with a friend. He didn't ask which one. That should have told me everything about what he actually saw when he looked at me. He texted daily about the apartment. "Do you like cream or white for the walls? The movers need a head count. I think the alcove would be perfect for a desk setup." I replied sparingly, neutral, non-committal. "Either works. We can figure it out. You have good taste." He never once asked how I was doing. By the end of the first week, he seemed satisfied, convinced I'd cooled off, confident this was just a phase I'd grow out of once reality set back in. He didn't know me at all. The second week was when everything shifted. You know that moment when you realize someone never really knew you, when all their certainty about who you are crumbles? On Tuesday evening, I heard a knock on my studio door. I hadn't given David my new address, not directly, but he'd always been good at piecing things together when it benefited him. I opened the door and watched his expression change as he stepped inside. He froze. The studio was exactly what it was: small, dated, plainly lived in, no dishwasher, a stove with one burner that took longer to heat up than the others, a bathroom so narrow you had to step sideways to close the door. He stood there, eyes scanning the room like he was walking through a cautionary tale. "This is where you've been staying?" he asked slowly. "Yes, it's small, it's affordable." He frowned. "We're about to move into a $3,800 a month apartment. Why are you living like a college student who just got dumped?" I didn't answer. He took a few more steps into the space, and with each detail he noticed, his face tightened. The peeling paint, the thin walls, the window but faced a parking lot. "There's not even a dishwasher," he said. "And wait, is that mold in the corner?" "It's character," I said quietly. He turned to me, incredulous. "This place is depressing, Lena. This is where people live when they've given up on themselves." And there it was. The same tone, the same quiet superiority, like my choices were proof of my failure. "This isn't about the apartment," he said quickly, waving his hand like he was erasing something. "This is about what I said the other night. What did I say that was so terrible? Because I'm trying to remember a moment when I told you I didn't love you. I said my promotion wasn't impressive. I compared me to your ex. You suggested I was behind. I was using her as an example of what's possible. That's motivation. That's what good partners do. They push each other." I looked at him, really looked, and I realized he believed this completely, every word of it. He wasn't being deliberately cruel. He was convinced he was helping me. "You're so sensitive sometimes," he added, and I could hear the frustration in his voice now, the frustration of someone having to explain something obvious. "You know that, right?" I didn't respond. Silence stretched between us, heavy and unyielding. He shifted uncomfortably, not because he doubted himself, but because I wasn't playing my usual role. I wasn't defending him. I wasn't making him feel better about what he'd done. "You'll come around," he said finally. "You always do." He left annoyed, but certain that my independence was a tantrum, not a decision, that I would eventually realize how impractical this was and come crawling back to him, back to the apartment, back to the life he was designing, whether I wanted it or not. That night I lay on my air mattress and stared at the ceiling fan as it rattled softly above me. And I realized something chilling in its simplicity. He wasn't cruel. He was secure in the belief that I would always adjust myself to fit the shape of his expectations, and that certainty was exactly why this couldn't be fixed. By the time the third week began, the pressure escalated in ways I wasn't prepared for. His mother called twice. That specific tone mothers use when they're pretending to be concerned, but are really demanding an explanation for why you've embarrassed their son. I kept it vague. "We're working through some things." She offered to mediate, suggested a family dinner, a conversation, a reset, as if respect and love were just scheduling issues that could be resolved with the right timing. Then came the group text. David added me to a chat with his mother, his sister, and his best friend. The subject line read, "Wedding planning updates." Links to venues, screenshots of floral arrangements, a long voice message from his mother about how classic ivory would photograph better than white. No one asked me what I wanted. They assumed. They proceeded with a future that no longer included my participation in the decisions. I stared at my phone, stunned by how efficiently a life can continue without your consent. Watched it unfold like standing behind glass, observing a world that had already moved on without me. That Thursday evening, he texted, "I took tomorrow off work for the move-in logistics. Movers confirmed, grabbed new bedding from Pottery Barn. Expensive, but worth it." A few minutes later, "I know the last few weeks have been rough, but tomorrow is the start of something beautiful, a fresh chapter, our real life. I love you. Can't wait to build our home together." I stared at those words until the screen dimmed. Then I locked my phone and set it face down on the table. That night, I didn't sleep much, not because I was anxious, but because I was bracing for impact, for the moment reality would finally catch up to his momentum. Move-in day arrived quietly. I was at my studio drinking coffee from my single favorite mug when my phone rang around 10 in the morning. David's name lit up the screen. "What did you do?"
he shouted, panic spilling through the line like something breaking. "What do you mean?" I asked, staying calm. "I'm at the building, with the movers. The property manager just told me the lease was canceled. He handed me paperwork and said there's no unit reserved in our name." I could hear the confusion turning to something else. Understanding. Betrayal. "Yes," I said, "that's correct." 10 seconds of stunned silence. "You canceled it?" he asked. "Why would you do that?" "Because I'm not moving into a luxury apartment with someone who thinks my career accomplishments aren't impressive, someone who compares me to his ex unprompted, someone who measures my worth against milestones I haven't hit yet and decides I'm behind." "That was one conversation," he snapped. "I was having a bad day. My boss criticized my quarterly report. I was feeling insecure." "So you took that insecurity on me and made me feel small about the biggest success of my working life." "I was just being honest," he said. "Would you rather I lie? Pretend I think your career is impressive when—" He stopped himself. "But not fast enough." "When what?" I asked. Silence. "No," I said. "Finish the sentence. Tell me what you were actually going to say." More silence. "Goodbye, David," I said. I hung up. Then I blocked his number, his email, his social media, everything. 20 minutes later, his mother called from her own phone. I answered once, just once. "You need to fix this," she said, without a greeting. "My son is standing in a parking lot with a moving truck and nowhere to go. The movers are charging by the hour. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" I imagine it's about as humiliating as being told your decade of professional work isn't impressive because his ex made more money at a younger age. "She didn't mean it like that," she snapped. "He meant it exactly like that, and he doubled down on it this morning. You're being petty," she said, "vindictive. No real women do this." I could feel something hardening in me, not anger, just clarity. "I didn't leave him stranded," I said. "He has family, he has resources. What he doesn't have is a fiancé willing to bankrupt herself for a lifestyle while being told she's not enough." She called me cruel, immature, said I'd regret this when no man wanted someone so fragile. I let her finish before hanging up. An hour later, her father texted, "Real women don't do this to men they claim to love." I didn't reply. I just sat on the edge of my new bed, not an air mattress anymore, but a real one, simple and firm, and listened to the quiet. For the first time in weeks, my phone stopped buzzing. The silence wasn't lonely, it was clean. Next time, when the story everyone tells about you doesn't match the truth you're living.
I thought that would be the end of it. One dramatic morning, a few ugly phone calls, then silence and eventual peace. I underestimated how deeply people cling to a narrative once they've decided who the villain is. By the next day, the story had already begun to spread. Quietly at first, sideways glances, pauses in conversations, the kind of social static you feel before anyone actually says your name out loud. People knowing something, but not knowing what. I didn't defend myself, not immediately. I went to work, took meetings, reviewed budgets, presented forecasts. My team congratulated me again on the promotion, and this time when they said it, I believed them, not because they were suddenly impressed, but because I'd stopped apologizing for my own success. That night, I ordered takeout from a Thai place down the street and ate it sitting cross-legged on my bed. No table yet, no couch, just space and silence, and the realization that loneliness and solitude are two completely different things. Then the messages started again, not from David, from everyone else. This is the part where you realize how quickly people will choose sides, how the story matters more than the truth. His sister texted, "You better not be getting cold feet. He's already put down deposits." Deposits for a wedding we'd never planned together, venues I'd never approved, vendors I'd never agreed to. I stared at that message for a long time, then set my phone down without responding. Let her sit with her own assumptions. Later that evening, a mutual friend called, someone I'd known for years. "I'm just trying to understand," she said carefully. "He's saying you ghosted him, that you disappeared right before move-in day without warning." "I didn't disappear. I canceled a lease I paid for with my own money, and I told him exactly why. He knows why." There was a pause. Then, quietly, "Did he really say your promotion wasn't impressive?" "Yes." "And compared you to his ex?" "Yes." Another pause, longer this time. "Oh," she said, and I could hear the shift in her voice, the moment when the narrative she'd been told started to crack. That was almost worse than the anger, the realization that people hadn't even questioned his version. They'd just accepted it and built their judgments on top of it. By day 3, Marcus's best friend reached out through a burner Instagram account. I almost admired the effort. "I'm just trying to hear both sides," the message began. It quickly turned into a lecture about how I'd humiliated him, how I'd embarrassed his family, how I'd destroyed his mental health. I replied with 3 words: "He's not my fiancé." Then I blocked the account. Day 4, a different friend told me David had moved back in with his parents temporarily, that the movers had charged him $800 for the wasted trip, that the furniture he'd already bought, most of it delivered, was stacked in his childhood bedroom. Apparently, he couldn't afford to keep it there and couldn't afford to move it. I should have felt something. Guilt, maybe. Satisfaction, perhaps. Some kind of vindication. Instead, I felt nothing, because I finally understood something crucial. This wasn't punishment, it was alignment. I'd spent years adjusting myself, my tone, my expectations, my needs, folding myself into a shape that fit his vision of who I should be. Canceling that lease wasn't revenge, it was correction. On day 5, an actual letter arrived, 5 pages handwritten on thick, expensive paper with his initials embossed at the top. I recognized the stationery. I'd once said it was excessive. He'd laughed and said, "Details matter." I read it once, then again. Page 1, "How dare I do this to him?" Page 2, "He hadn't meant to hurt me." Page 3, "I owed him a real conversation." Page 4, a warning, he had screenshots, he could tell people I'd abandoned him. Page 5, forgiveness, an offer, a way back. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and dropped it into the trash. Not angrily, decisively. That night, I slept without dreams, and when I woke up, the world felt quieter. Not because the noise was gone, but because I'd finally stopped responding to it. By the end of the first weekend after the cancellation, I realized something unsettling. I wasn't part of the story anymore. At least, not the version being told. I heard it in fragments, in pauses when I walked into a room, in the way conversations softened around me, like people were handling something fragile they didn't quite understand. Apparently, I'd ghosted him. Apparently, I'd left him stranded. Apparently, I panicked and self-sabotaged over one comment. The details changed depending on who was telling the story, but the conclusion stayed the same. I was the one who'd gone too far. At first, I tried to ignore it, told myself it didn't matter, that people would eventually understand the truth, that truth has a way of surfacing on its own. But truth doesn't travel as fast as emotion, especially when someone else is crying louder. The second weekend after the cancellation, I went to a friend's birthday dinner. Nothing dramatic, just a casual gathering in a neighborhood restaurant. I almost didn't go, but I refused to let my world shrink just because someone else had decided to rewrite me. I knew something was off the moment I arrived. The smiles were tight, the hugs hesitant. Conversations stopped half a beat too late, like I'd walked into a room where I'd just been the topic of discussion. Halfway through the night, one of our mutual friends pulled me aside. Just don't want to make this awkward," he said carefully. "Is it true you just disappeared on David, like no warning?" I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself.
I pulled out my phone and scrolled back to that first night, found the message thread and turned the screen toward him. He read it silently, and I watched his expression shift, slowly and unmistakably. "She actually said this?" he asked. "David said this?" "Word for word," I corrected. He exhaled hard. "Wow," he said. That's not a bad day. That's a world view." He bought me a drink after that, apologized for assuming, said he'd heard a completely different version from David's version of events. "I figured I'd get both sides," I said, and that became the pattern after that. One conversation at a time, one receipt at a time. I never blasted screenshots publicly, never made it a social media spectacle. I just told the truth when asked and let people sit with it. Not everyone believed me. Some chose David's side immediately, said I was cold, calculated, too career-focused, as if ambition were a moral flaw instead of the trait they admired right up until it stopped benefiting them. I let them go, didn't fight for them, didn't try to convince them. Others stayed neutral, avoided both of us, changed the subject, took the safe way out. But a few, quietly, privately, reached out to tell me they understood, that they'd been there, that they'd ignored comments like that for years, that they wished they'd walked away sooner, that they were proud of me for leaving. Those conversations saved me in ways I didn't expect. One night, almost 2 weeks after move-in day, I ran into David's sister at a grocery store. She saw me first. Her cart froze mid-aisle, her eyes flickered over me, quick and assessing, like she was looking for signs of regret, looking for a crack she could exploit. She finally said, "You really hurt him." I replied, "I know, and I meant it. I had hurt him. That was true." "So did he," I added. She didn't have a response for that, just shook her head and walked away. That was the moment it hit me like a thunderbolt. People weren't upset because I'd done something wrong. They were upset because I'd done something unexpected. I'd stepped out of the role they were comfortable with, the reasonable one, the forgiving one, the one who absorbs disappointment quietly and keeps things moving forward. I'd disrupted the narrative, and disruption always looks like cruelty to people who benefit from the status quo. That night, back in my studio, I unpacked the last box. It held things I hadn't touched in years: old notebooks, a framed certificate from my first promotion, a photograph of myself in my early 20s, standing outside my first office building, smiling like I couldn't believe I was allowed to be there. I set the photo on the shelf and stood back. I didn't recognize that woman anymore, but I respected her because she'd gotten me here. And for the first time since all of this started, I felt something close to certainty. Let them tell their story. I was finally living mine. Next time, when the past refuses to stay in the past.
It happened by accident, which somehow made it worse. I was at a coffee shop I rarely went to, too far from my studio, too close to his office for comfort. But it was raining hard, the kind of rain that makes you duck into the first shelter you find, and I needed caffeine because I hadn't slept well the night before. Because life doesn't stop arranging collisions just because you've made a clean exit. I was waiting for my order when I heard my name. I knew who it was before I turned around. David stood a few feet behind me, holding a paper cup he hadn't touched. He looked worn. Not dramatically, not in a way that begged for pity, just thinner around the edges, like someone who'd been replaying the same conversation over and over, hoping it would eventually change, hoping that if he just thought about it hard enough, he could rewrite what had happened. He wasn't alone. A woman stood beside him, someone I didn't recognize, a coworker maybe, or a friend drafted into emotional support duty. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Just 5 minutes." I considered saying no, not because I was afraid, but because I already knew how this conversation would go. He would apologize, but only because there were consequences. He would say what he thought I wanted to hear. He would perform remorse. Still, I nodded. 5 minutes felt survivable. We stepped aside near the window. Rain streaked down the glass in uneven lines, blurring the world outside. I made one comment, he said immediately. No greeting, no build-up, no softness. Just those words, like they were supposed to explain everything. One comment on a bad day when I was stressed and insecure, and you destroyed everything we built over 3 years. I let him finish, didn't interrupt, didn't defend. Do you really think that was proportional? He asked. I met his eyes, calm and steady. You didn't make one comment, I said. You revealed a standard. That's not the same thing. That's not fair, he said. None of this is fair. But it's honest, I replied, which is apparently what matters to you. His jaw tightened. I was wrong, he said quickly, like he was reading from a script. Okay, I admit it. I shouldn't have compared you to anyone. I shouldn't have said your promotion wasn't impressive. He paused, watching my face closely, like he was waiting to see if this was working. It is impressive, he added. You worked hard for it. I'm sorry I didn't recognize that. There it was, the performance, the timing. Is that what you want to hear? He asked. Because I'm saying it. I'm saying you were right and I was wrong. I shook my head slowly. I wanted to hear it when it mattered, not when there were consequences, not when your mother was calling me awful names, not when you were trying to convince me I'd overreacted. So that's it? He asked, and I could hear the frustration creeping back in, the frustration of someone whose apology wasn't being accepted. You won't even try to work through this? 3 years just disappears? I tried, I said quietly. For 3 years. I listed it calmly, not angrily. I tried while paying most of our shared expenses. I tried while you treated my work like background noise. I tried while you spoke about your ex like a benchmark I hadn't hit yet, like I was always going to be second best if I didn't somehow become her. That's not how I saw it, he said. I know. That's the problem. His voice roughened then, just slightly. You're not perfect either, he said. You're cold, you shut down, you make decisions without talking things through. I nodded. I did this one without talking it through because talking hadn't worked for 3 years. And I realized that talking to you was like talking to a wall. You weren't listening. You were just waiting for your turn to explain why I was wrong. Silence stretched between us. People were watching now, not openly, but enough that I could feel it. The barista had stopped wiping the counter. A couple at a nearby table had paused mid-conversation. David blinked hard and looked away, his throat working like he was swallowing something he didn't want anyone to see. His companion stepped closer, a hand hovering near his shoulder. She looked at me with such intensity, such protection, like I was something sharp and dangerous, like I was cutting him open in public with words that were somehow sharper because they were true. I hope you figure out what you're actually measuring people by, I said softly, because it's not working. Then I picked up my coffee as my name was called, and I walked out. Didn't look back, didn't slow down, didn't let myself feel the weight of his sadness, because it wasn't my sadness to carry anymore. The rain had lightened to a mist. The street smelled clean, like it had been washed. I felt nothing dramatic, no triumph, no guilt, just distance. And distance, I was learning, is its own kind of mercy. I thought the coffee shop would be the final scene, the accidental run-in, the public moment where reality finally caught up to him, the quiet walk away that leaves everyone with a sense of closure. But closure is a privilege people expect when they think they're owed an explanation. 3 days later, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line read, "This is on you." It was from David's mother. She'd found my work address somehow. I didn't ask how. I didn't want to know how easily someone could track you down when they felt entitled to your attention. This is the part where you realize that some people will never accept responsibility for their own actions. The email was short, direct, and absolutely furious. "You've destroyed my son.
He's not eating, he's not sleeping, he's talking about dropping everything and moving across the country to start over. This is your responsibility. All he did was share his honest feelings with you, and you punished him for it. That's not strength, that's cruelty. Don't ever contact this family again. I read it once, then again, slowly, waiting for something to rise up in me. Anger, defensiveness, the urge to explain myself one last time, to make her understand that I wasn't the villain in her story. Nothing came because I finally understood something that made everything else click into place. They didn't want an explanation. They wanted a confession, an apology that restored the version of events where David was the wounded party and I was the unstable one who couldn't handle the truth. I wasn't going to give them that. I archived the email. No reply. That afternoon, I went for a walk after work. No headphones, no destination, just movement through a city that didn't care about my drama. People arguing on phones, laughing on sidewalks, living entire lives that had nothing to do with my breakup. It was oddly grounding. 3 years with someone doesn't disappear just because you decide it has to. There were good memories buried in the wreckage. Trips we had taken, inside jokes that would never make sense to anyone else. Nights that felt safe simply because we were together, moments where I felt seen by him before he started measuring me against other women. Losing that still hurt, but hurt wasn't the same thing as regret. Regret would have meant staying. Regret would have meant shrinking myself into smaller and smaller shapes until there was nothing left but the space he had given me. That night, I sat on the floor of my studio and leaned against the wall, eating leftovers straight from the container. The space was quiet. No commentary, no correction, no one evaluating whether my choices were impressive enough to deserve approval. My phone buzzed once, a text from an unknown number. I didn't open it. I blocked it without reading the message. Then I put the phone face down and let the silence settle. For the first time since all of this began, I didn't feel like I was reacting anymore. I felt finished. It's been about 6 weeks since move-in day, long enough for the noise to fade, long enough for patterns to settle, long enough for me to tell the difference between missing someone and missing who I thought they were. The studio doesn't feel temporary anymore. I bought a real couch last weekend. Nothing fancy, just a gray sectional from a furniture outlet that still smelled faintly of warehouse dust and new fabric. I carried it up the stairs myself, because the building doesn't have an elevator, and somewhere between the second and third flight, I laughed out loud. Sweaty, breathless, strangely proud of myself. I hung a few pieces of art on the walls. Not expensive, just things that made the space feel like mine. A decent coffee maker sits on the counter now, the kind that makes mornings easier without pretending to be luxurious. It's small, but it's honest. It's me. Work has been good, busy, challenging in the way that sharpens you instead of draining you. My team treats me differently now, not because of the title, but because I've stopped apologizing for taking up space. My boss mentioned almost casually that I'm already being considered for the next level in a couple of years, further along than anyone expected. Imagine that. I haven't heard from David directly in weeks. The mutual friend network has mostly gone quiet. A few people chose his side, a few chose mine. Most did what adults eventually do when the drama loses its novelty. They moved on. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the good parts. 3 years isn't nothing. We had real moments.